Thank you. Thanks, Angel. I have to say, Angel and me, we reconnected again at a conference called, it was the Awake and Aware conference out of all the conferences. So, pretty impressive how we reconnected. So what I want to talk today about is, I don't know if you guys noticed, but we're living in some very interesting times. There's a lot of things happening in the world. I can see it in myself. I don't know if you follow the world events, the oil spill, or whatever's happening in the world. There's some, things happening in the world which I think we cannot ignore much longer. So what I want to talk today is, part of it is called the time of transition. There are a lot of ancient prophecies and teachings that hint at this day and age, talking about a shift going on of some level. I want to talk a little bit more, not even get too much in the conspiracy aspect of it, but more also understanding ourselves, the part of self-work and understanding yourself, so we can really, be connected to our true self and act accordingly and really, build community based on truth. And, so the title is The Times of Transition and New Age Fallacies. New Age Fallacies because there are a lot of what I've noticed, spiritual teachings out there, so-called spiritual teachings, which seem to be a bit distorted from what the ancients have talked about, and kind of show a little false sense of reality in accordance with what's going on. So this is a painting by Alex Gray, The Signs of the Times. I mean, when we look at the world, as I said, the world is changing. We can see it in ourselves. We can see it in the world. You cannot really ignore it anymore. There's a worldwide economic decline happening. We can see it in this country. The dollar is basically losing its value. People losing their jobs, and natural resources are declining, food and water all over the world. We still don't feel it that much here in the United States because we're a bit off than other third world countries. We can see the climate is changing, which, by the way, has nothing to do with man-made global warming, which is a whole different agenda, but climate change is more about the cosmic changes happening to the universe and our Earth. There are Earth changes happening all over. They're increasing. I just heard my friend Chris told me there was an earthquake in Washington, D.C. just a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, which is pretty interesting. The oil spill, which is happening in the Gulf of Mexico, which eventually will affect the whole world on some level. It's not going to be just in that area down there. What we also see is an expanding global power structure, where the power is being more and more centralized to the few, and more corporations actually rule the world. It's not, I don't know if you guys noticed, but governments are really more like, not really governments anymore in the sense of in place by the people, for the people, but they're sponsored by corporations. And that's happening all over the world as well. What I can see, and I don't know, I also don't know how everybody is aware of on certain issues, but some people seem to be more aware than others, and starting to take actions. There's effort to build community. There is people are introducing new economic models and trying to be more self-sufficient and be more oriented towards self-sustainability and so on. But many people are also not aware and kind of live life as if life will always be as it always is. But as I will go into a little bit deeper, we're living in times that are I see them as very precious times. It's really important that we become more aware of certain things in the world and within ourselves. And also I want to make a note, whatever I present here, this is just giving food for thought. I know for some people it might be a little bit, over the top, or think, what the hell is this guy talking about? For some people it may be really basic. But essentially it's just food for thought. It's not like this is the truth and this is how it is. You shouldn't believe anything, and always think for yourself and do your own research and look into it yourself. That's really what we all, I think, should be doing. So what it really comes down to is to separate illusion from reality, to what is truly going on as opposed to an illusionary existence which we take for reality. There's a difference between what most people think is going on as opposed to what is actually happening. And most of what we've been told and have been taught about in the world is simply not the truth. And but they are more or less implemented ideas in order to form our minds and essentially behavior to confirm to a certain, certain behavior and do and act in certain ways, and give us the impression that we're free when we are not. And that in itself is the whole, what also the ancient teachings call about the invisible prison we're in, so to speak. But the whole hypnosis and conditioning of humanity, there are different areas, and this is probably the basics here, right here, of how our minds and how we're being literally formed to a certain understanding of the world. One is education. And when I talk about education, I'm talking more about public education and public high schools, college and university and so on. And what we need to understand, I feel, that what we were taught in school and what our children are learning in school is not necessarily the truth. But again, what I said before, but more in very ways about forming our minds to accept an official culture that fits us into society to, again, act and behave in a certain ways, it teaches us more or less to become technicians rather than free-thinking individuals who think for themselves. And really also, we're not taught in schools to learn about ourselves, but more to learn a trade, or to learn, to become technicians, so to speak. So we get a job, work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, which nobody really questions either. Why do we really have to work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and then we're too tired to do anything else? And that's by keeping, us preoccupied. We never really have the time to question any of it, and we keep just moving on in the rat race, So the horror of it all, that it starts with the children. The children are being literally programmed with the false reality at a time of the years when they're very impressionable and suggestible to input. A lot of what's being taught in school, from history to religion, is really not based on what's actually happening or happened. And on top of it, they make you pay it through taxes, to pay for tuitions and whatnot. So education is a big one, how our minds are being conditioned to a certain idea of reality. The mainstream media. The question is, where do we get our information from? Mainstream media, especially TV, literally programs our minds. TV program, again, with certain, I call it official culture, with certain values, desire, wants, and opinions, which are not necessarily our own, but we are literally programmed with certain ideas, which we then repeat and manifest in our own lives. It also distracts us from really what is happening on the planet through, superficial entertainment and sports, celebrities, sitcoms, and people at work. They talk about these things, mostly gossiping around, and talk about the latest sitcom without really, understanding that there's more to life than what's being told through the mainstream media. And also, we can see more and more when you look into it that a lot of the media outlets are really controlled by the same corporations. So you get, no matter what station you look or what newspaper you read, New York Times, LA Times, Fox, they're all basically owned by the same people who filter the same information and distort it very much. For me, it was very interesting. I came from Germany here 15 years ago. In Europe, news is very different. It's a little bit more objective and more, you get actually news. When I came here, it was interesting. I saw the news, it's more like it's an entertainment show. It's really just a show, but no news really, no objective news, but highly distorted, and it doesn't really give you an objective view of what's happening in the world at all. Another big one is religion, obviously. I think most of us are aware that, religion as it's, especially the major religions as Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, everybody fights for, who's their better God, and this whole illusion of a monotheistic God who is outside yourself and judging you and punishing you when you do certain things. And what's also an obvious fact is that there have been more wars and death in the history based on religion in the name of God than anything else. And religion is also being, heavily introduced through education, through the mainstream media, to form our mind and to implement certain belief systems which are simply not true. entertainment that goes together with the mainstream media, movies, computer games, TV. I mean, movies. There's some good movies out there, which on some of them I will touch a little bit to give a little bit of different sense. But a lot of movies are simply just blockbusters to kind of like give you some adrenaline rush and keep you sedated and closed off really to a higher state of potential and awareness. Government. That's government nowadays. There's no real government, as I said before, in the sense by the people for the people. And again, this talking about these things, people think right away about so-called the conspiracy theories, but none of it is really conspiracy theory. I mean, everybody who takes a careful analysis of history and looks into these things can find out for themselves that governments are merely a tool for the elite to keep power and wealth to a few. And in many ways, the main leaders, presidents and so on, don't really think and feel like you and I do. They have a wholly different agenda, but they appear as somebody, who is truly caring for you when in fact they are not. I also want to emphasize that not everyone who is working for the government is evil. There are a lot of, well-meaning individuals with conscience who do their best, but they're caught within the system, and compartmentalization is the name of the game, which means there's a pyramid system, which the knowledge and the control comes from the top, and the lower you're on the pyramid, you have no idea what's happening on the top. So in that sense, the whole structure is in place. So the control we are kind of under is not martial law or force control. It's actually by suppression of knowledge and mind or consciousness control through shaping beliefs of the masses to accept their version of reality. So again, be it in kingdoms or governments, the power structure is still the same. Nothing has really changed. There's more freedom within the so-called prison, but we're still enslaved in so many ways. The left and the right, like how people fight about or have opinions about the left, the right, the Democrats, Republicans, it's all the same on the top. There's no difference. And there is also no true choice to voting, which a lot of people still hold on to. Why? Because corporations, have taken over on so many levels all over the world, and the president and the government are merely salesmen and spokesmen for these corporations. And when corporations take over a government, it's also called fascism. So in a sense, there's no democracy anymore, but fascism on many levels. Again, this can very much proven if somebody is willing to do some work and look, behind the curtain. Also, democracy in itself becomes a very perfect system for control, because if you can shape the beliefs of the people to adhere to certain ideas and to behave in certain ways and manipulate their choices, then you can control them, by making them believe that they actually have free choice when in fact they don't. The best example is the election of Obama. They put just another puppet in who looks a bit better than the past puppet, has his minority look going, and is a bit more eloquent than Bush and so on. But essentially, they both serve the same hand. Two puppets, basically being controlled by the same hand. So in a way, I see governments as we know them today take care like a farmer takes care of their pigs, very literally, like still taking care of them, helping them, keeping them healthy to an extent, to a minimum. But essentially, the pigs are still enslaved, or within the fence. So that's about. All these topics that I'm touching on, you can make a lecture on its own in either way. I'm just kind of like going over it a little bit. The monetary system, it's as fake as it gets. Money really has no value. There's nothing. You have to look at your dollar bills, which we're seeing right now. It's just paper, and it's losing its value, and will continue to lose its value. Because why? The Federal Reserve, which is as federal as the Federal Express, keeps printing money out of nothing while loaning it to the banks on interest. So it's just perpetuating the whole bubble and devaluing the dollar. Then they sell you credit cards, give you credit cards for you to buy things you don't really need or want anyways, based on desires you took in from the mainstream media education because you've been told that money brings you happiness or accumulation of things brings you happiness.